So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Hui Wilcox. I am the Dean of Kofi Annan Institute for Global Citizenship at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, the US, or Minnesota Makoche, where Dakota people and Ojibwe people have had their ancestral land and been living here for many centuries. And currently, though, I'm logging in from Budapest, so it's my afternoon time. So I am very privileged to host this session with Brother Bayo here. And so I will introduce him. I think he really doesn't need introduction with a lot of you, but we also have some newer members of our family. So I will introduce with his biography, and then I'm just gonna hand it over to Brother Bayo. So Bayo Akomolafe is a widely celebrated international speaker, post-humanist thinker, poet, teacher, public intellectual, essayist, and author of two books, These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, Letters to My Daughter on Humanity's Search for Home, and We Will Tell Our Own Story, The Lions of Africa Speak. He is the founder of the Emergence Network and host of the online post-activist course, We Will Dance with Mountains. And that was how I got to Brother Bayo's work. He currently lectures at Pacifica Graduate Institute, California, and University of Vermont, Burlington, Vermont. He sits on the board of many organizations, including Science and Non-Duality in the US and Local Futures in Australia. In 2022, he was appointed the inaugural Global Senior Fellow of University of California, Berkeley's Othering and Belonging Institute, where he acts as the forum's provocateur in residence, guiding forum members in thinking and reimagining our collective work towards justice in ways that reject binary thinking and easy answers. He has also been appointed senior fellow for the New Institute in Hamburg, Germany, and scholar in residency at Schumacher Center for New Economics. And we got to know Bayo personally, of course, through the network. It's been a while, but last fall, in October, we felt at Macalester College that the universe was in our favor when Brother Bayo said yes to our invitation to keynote for our annual International Roundtable event. And we had fantastic few days of learning from Bayo, and then he has the desire to come back to Minnesota, much to many of our surprises. I don't know if you know much about Minnesota. It's not, flyover country. It's not the most popular destination. But we have had the honor of, connecting Bayo with our university leadership. And so he has been appointed to be the Hubert Humphrey Distinguished Professor at Macalester College. We are truly, truly very fortunate. So speaking of Macalester, this event has been made possible with the support of course, my institute, Kofi Annan Institute for Global Citizenship, and also a couple other units at Macalester College, including institutional equity. They have generously offered a racial justice project fund, and then the presidential fund for dialogue across differences. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Brother Bayo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sister. And for once, I'm going to just cut through the the ways that I often like to start, which is with deep appreciation and acknowledgement and thanks to all the people who made this happen, and my great respect for my dear sister Wei, who is my co-conspirator in chief in these matters that are unfolding, and just get to the food because I know we're here to eat, right? We're hungry. So let's get to it real quick. I have slides that I want to share with you, so we're just going to dive into it. Here it is, folks. Can everyone see this? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see it. If you can see it, there it is. Beautiful. That is that is a Brontosaurus. It's the reason why you're here. We're all here because of this majestic creature, which I want to take a few moments to introduce to you. Brontosaurus excelsus. Its name is translated into English as thunder lizard. Lived about 150 million years ago. And then somewhere in the United States in the 1870s, if I remember correctly, in the 1870s, the bones of this creature was excavated and hastily put together by coffee addicted artists in a museum and put on the stand. And so we have this beautiful creature, and the name was given to it somewhere around the mid 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. I may be heavily mistaken on that. But somewhere along its lifeline, after its discovery, after its christening, Brontosaurus lost its name, right? Scientists were not so sure it deserved the name Brontosaurus. They were not so sure it was distinct from its relatives, its cousins, its reptilian others. But recently it made a return. In 2014 or 2015, it was published that Brontosaurus was back. And then we started to notice it was everywhere in the markets. Here in India, Brontosaurus is quite popular. They sell Brontosauruses in Chennai, and if you pay some good money, you can get some to eat. Okay. Except in this instance, I couldn't get any here for us to learn with, to eat with. So there will be no eating with Brontosauruses today. But I'm kidding, of course. This was just an elaborate way to get into the mix, into the code or the joke of the title. But I want to say something about that real quick. That I'm sure none of you, no one here thought you were coming to eat or cook Brontosauruses. If you believed that you were coming to eat a Brontosaurus or to learn how to cook a Brontosaurus, then I apologize. In this time when transparency is the standard, then I failed that objective. We're not cooking Brontosauruses today. But my deeper apologies are reserved for those of us who thought or think that we're not here to learn how to cook Brontosauruses. Because that's, I think, why we're here. And I know that feels like a paradox. I'm apologizing for something and I'm apologizing for its reverse. But this is what we want to work through today. We want to work through this idea that which I've labeled cooking with Brontosauruses or cooking Brontosauruses. We want to work with the idea that there is something to do here that doesn't have a usual title yet, doesn't have a usual name yet. And maybe the title, as beguiling as it is, as cute as it is, offers something more than just a metaphor, offers something more than just a trick or a sleight of hand. Okay? And that's the real context of this. The Brontosaurus is not just a ruse. It's not just a joke. It's not just a cute sleight of hand. It really is, in its diva-like proportions, it is an invitation, the likes of which are still being articulated through the troubling times that we are living in. And so my name is Bayo, as you've already heard, and I'm grateful to be here. But here is the troubling story. that we want to speak about here, the context of here, the end of the world, which is increasingly part of my language these days. Here, the context of our conversation, brothers and sisters, siblings here, is the end of the world. The end of the world. I have a story of the end of the world. I have several stories of the end of the world. Um, but I want to tell you one particular story that has very, very recently fastened itself to my soul, to my rib cage, and has made breathing heavier for me. This is a timeline of it, of this story. You know this dude? I see Andreas here. Uh, yeah, just gonna tell you this story. You know bits and pieces of it. The President of the United States, re-elected recently, President Donald Trump, not too long ago announced tariffs. Right. I'm not going to trace all the nuances and all the key ins and outs of this administration, the United States present regime, I would prefer to call it, all its declarations about the tariffs, what the president is calling reciprocal tariffs. Right. But it just so happens that the United States and China are in this moment in one of the most interesting tariff wars that we've ever noticed or we've ever recorded in modern times. The United States placed tariffs on the entire world. And then with China specifically, escalated its tariff war to what, 145%, I think it is presently. China reciprocated and put tariffs on the United States as well. And now, so there's this war between the two biggest economies on the planet. China did something recently that I read about. China having the powers to produce and control about 90% of the world's rare earth materials, the names of which are too esoteric for me to remember. I know there's a dysprosium or a samarium or something like that. Well, whatever these rare earth materials are, they're quite important to how we use laptops and use our phones and use electronics in general. And China has the power to move through these processes and to control how they're produced, even down to missiles and war technologies. China has a lion's share in how these products are manufactured. And so China has placed an embargo, has just basically declared it will not be doing business with especially the United States when it comes to these rare earth materials, which leads me to the tension of the moment. Because the United States, as the rest of the planet, depends heavily on these rare earth materials, and China is not willing to play ball, they have recently, that is the United States, that is President Trump, has recently signed an executive order allowing the United States to explore deep sea mining. I don't know if you've read about this. Deep sea mining. This is where my heart starts to beat real fast because we don't even know what's down there. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know the species that live there. We have no clue what we're dealing with here. But there are movements and gestures and protocols and technologies and funding in place. I read about a Canadian mining company that is already positioning itself to land this huge opportunity to mine the oceans of our planet, as if we couldn't even be in deeper trouble than we already are in. When I read this piece a few days ago, how the tariff wars and the tariff um, conflagrations, especially between China and the US, has led to deep sea mining protocols being reactivated. I despaired. And yes, I had a tearful moment when I read this, when I read about this. Um, and I'm still living through it. I had a conversation with my daughter about this. My daughter is angry, right? She cares so much for animals in general that sometimes I think she wants to get rid of humans altogether to save the planet. It's a problematic proposition, but this is where my 11-year-old daughter is. And I shared tears with her with regards to this. This is what the end of the world looks like for me. It's not, I'm not pearl clutching here and saying, oh, we're disturbing the ecosystem, or any instance of technological exploration is therefore noxious and toxic or bad. But there's something about this gesture that reiterates and reinforces the way modernity meets the unknown. That is to immediately send probes and war machines and missiles to colonize it, to flatten it. To me, the end of the world is when the world is co-opted into utility. Then it's no longer a world then. It's just a space. Right? When everything is reduced to utility, when everything is a resource, when things do not have the permission, their own permission to wander, to not give a damn about human sociality, when everything is just part of our use, then that is what the end of the world looks like to me. And that is the context of our conversation. The end of the world, the fires next time, James Baldwin, the things we have to deal with now as fascism escalates, as authoritarianism escalates. My invitation through this series, and this is part 1 of 2, is that the invitation to cook a brontosaurus, as comical or as jocular as that sounds, is a lot more serious than it seems. But let's go into our first greeting of each other with a breakout. And I want to invite you to think about this question that is on your screen. What does the end of the world mean for you? Because you may not care about deep sea mining like Alethea does, or like I do, or you may not think that there is anything troubling at the moment. But we are all affected by these emergent matters. We're all roped in. None of us can walk scot-free from this. We're all touched and marked and designated and rearranged and discombobulated by these moments. So I want to invite you to think about this with other siblings in a room, just to ask yourself this question and give space for each other to listen to each other and share with each other as you greet each other. What does the end of the world mean for you? What does it mean for you? Not for Bayo or for Wei or for Lisa, but for you. And then when we're back, we'll spend some time just sharing, maybe 3 people, and then we'll dive into what today has for us. Does this make sense? Okay, see you soon in 10 minutes. Welcome back. If you're joining us, welcome back. Connie, I see you. Hi.
I see you, Bayo.
Hey, how you doing?
Feel blessed to be here. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. Okay, we're all back. Welcome, people. And I know that that breakout session may have sounded or may have felt very weighty and somber and saddening. But I just want to introduce right here, real quick, that it is in those circumstances. It is right in those circumstances when things are heavy that a crack might appear and make things lighter. There's a queer joy even in the slave ship. There's a strange kind of liberty even in the most dire circumstances. So welcome back. And I want to invite us to greet each other in this plenary modality properly. So if you can, not mind the noise, I invite you to unmute yourselves and let's greet each other in the language you prefer. Let's just do it together. Let's just
Yeah, we're going there, family, man.
Hello.
Hello,
Beautiful
G
people.
like beans.
Everybody.
Morning.
Good morning. Hi, Elliot.
Namufingye.
Shalom, shalom.
Buenos días.
Sing a song. Play the guitar. No.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to mute us again. You done?
Hey, Maria. Welcome, everybody.
Look, say hi.
Yes. Hi. Hello, Matthew. Hello, everybody. Okay, so we're back. Thank you so much. And I just want to slow things down a little bit, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this. Lisa, you could help me out here. Maybe the raising hand feature might work out, right? Let's try that digital hand thingy. Okay, so who would like to share what emerged in not just your own recollection, not just your own articulations, but what emerged in the conversation that you had? We can't go deep into it, but if you'd just like to share a little bit about that, then please raise your digital hand and I will call it on first come, first serve basis. Who would like to do that? What emerged for you? Okay, so Matthew's hands are up. And then we'll take two other siblings. But Matthew, you can go. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yes, I'm blessed. Yeah, I'm gonna lower the hand.
Hey, bro.
Good to be with you. Yeah, man. Good to be with you, brother Bayo, man. What emerged was a lot of sadness, fear, realism. I think a noticing of the overall her disconnection. Her being feeling targeted, feeling under attack, feeling like a killing is almost imminent, whether it be of energy, spirit, body, place.
Right.
Yeah, so pretty heavy. and I talked first, and the first thing I said was when I think about the end of a world, I think of the opportunity of a new world. I think about limitless possibilities. So it came in very bright. And I feel like I want to say to the rest of my group that I acknowledge and I honor where you are because we are in this together. And at the same time, just like I'll put in a chat, I refuse to relinquish my joy because I know the truth that there is no end, just like there is no beginning. Right? And I find solace in that. We too will become that part of the ocean. Say something wise real quick for me. Say it again. Draw this.
Say something wise.
You got a piece of wisdom for the people?
Of course.
She drew something.
What's her name? What's her name?
That's Zara.
Zara.
Yeah, man. Zara, little shaman.
Thank you, brother.
One of my favorite teachers. Yeah, man. Blessings to you, man. Good to be with you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, laughter is the wisdom. Cynthia, please. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Cynthia. There you go.
Hi, good morning. I would actually, I'm requesting, and of course they have every right to refuse, that Sophia from our group, from our breakout group, would share what she talked to us about. Sophia from Nyack.
I'm going to share what everyone talked about, but yeah, in our group, what emerged were actually one thing that stuck out to me was Bayo. There was a talk you gave a long time ago. And I'm not sure it was the same story about the Hebrew Israelites, but so this is of biblical and mythical proportions, the times that we're facing. What I offered the group that Cynthia was referring to is that this is the end of a world. It's not the end of the world, because the end of a world has come for many, many people around the world. Our indigenous brothers and sisters have experienced the end of world many times. I'm a first generation Haitian living in the US.
Yeah.
So there's very paradoxical feelings around that because I'm quite privileged. Yet there's been a long history of meeting these moments again and again. So at times you feel like you're built for these times, but also you're exhausted. And you wonder if this is going to be the time. We also talked about how generationally this is very different for people in the sunset years of their lives. Experiencing this as the end of their time is something many of us are sitting with, whether it's from a first person or from, having parents whose end of their lives will end this way, as well as young people having children at this time is quite a weighty responsibility. How to navigate this with the little ones is something that came up as well. And if I missed anything, please feel free to chime in, Cynthia or Gabrielle or Nana or Kate and Katie.
Sophia, where are you speaking from, sis?
I'm in Nyack, New York right now.
Oh, you're in New York. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sis.
Yeah.
Thank you, sis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is anyone from Cynthia's group wanting to speak? Cynthia, does this feel resonant? Is this what you wanted to share?
Yes, it was. It was this idea that, now is the time of monsters, right? There's, the way that we can look at it is that there's a new world waiting to be born. And I, just as an elder, I prefer to try to keep my hope. Yes.
I hear that. Thank you, Cynthia and Sophia. Thank you. Okay, one more. If you would like to share the spin, the tumble of voices and insights and worldings in your room. Sister, I know you speak about the individual level, but I wanted to say to you that the individual is shorthand for all of us. When we speak about the individual, we're already invoking the collective. So your life is trembling in mine, as mine is trembling in yours, and all our lives trembling in each other. You are not alone. If all I have to say in this space here and to close this thing is to say to you that you're not alone and that there is much more spaciousness and sanctuary here, even as the walls close in on us. If all I have to say is that, then so be it. But you're not alone, sister. And there will be no jumping for you because we will be flying. Jumping is giving ourselves to the logic of incarceration, we will fly together. This is the context of our exploration. This is public intellectualism that cannot stay put within the academic confines of knowledge or knowledge production. This is where we have to work, in the field where bodies are squeezed into the anorexic confines of empire, where we're being made and manufactured in the Procrustean beds that we've been incarcerated to. We're speaking today about this heat, this closure, about feeling what my brother was saying a while ago, like feeling the world closing in, or this idea of being targeted or being chased. We're speaking about that today. We're speaking about Maria. And I'm sure what she had to say, as what Sophia had to say, and Cynthia, resonates with most of us. Certainly does resonate with me. And yet the invitation of this space is what my elders, what my people, what these times persistently teach me. And that is, even as the walls collapse, in fact, the very, very conditionality of new worlds might be dependent on these closing walls, that this is not the end as we think of it. This is not a final bus stop. This is a launching pad for something different that we don't have a name for yet. Okay. Thank you all for sharing. Beyond the protocols of workshops like this, I just want us to hold close this vocation of tending for one another. Okay. So if you have each other's phone numbers, let's give ourselves a phone call and say, I heard you, or I just wanted to check up on you. Anything just to hold space for what's emerging now in the world. Okay. I have some slides to share. Today's conversation, How to Cook a Brontosaurus, is about fugitivity, blackness, race, empire, fire, and agency at the end of the world. And like I said earlier, this is part 1 of 2. But let's get into what else wants to be shared right now. Can everyone see this, by the way? Cynthia, can you see this? You're the only one on my screen right now. Okay, good. Thank you. I needed to show you how beautiful my slides are, so you appreciate my skills. We'll just linger there for a moment. Okay. Now that I see how much you admire my PowerPoint making slides skill set. Let's move to this. I want to start with this proposition. At the end of the world is always racial. It might be important to say that I take it as granted that we're not speaking about the world. There's no such thing as the world, right? Worlds are always radically incomplete, right? It's not even a matter of multiplicity. A world here, a world here, a world there, right? It's that worlds are radically incomplete. If they were complete, they wouldn't be worlds. What makes a world a worlding practice is that it is a failure to fully form itself, right? But I'm speaking from the guttural experience of endings now. When I speak about the end of the world, I've chosen to use this phrasing, because when the fires are falling on your head, when ice agents leap out of nowhere, when the fires in your neighborhood from recycling, the so-called recycling pipeline from the global north lands in your community, right? When all these things are happening, it doesn't feel like a world. It's not theoretical any longer. It's the world, the only world that you know. You don't cry out, oh, a world is ending, right? It's my world is ending. The world is ending. The world as I've known it is ending. So I speak from that guttural space, not in the dismissal of other ways of speaking about these times, but to kind of land it in our bones and to offer this provocative opening statement that the end of the world is always racial, but to also invite you to not be quick to jump into what you think that might mean, okay? So it's not, I don't mean that particularly. I don't mean that to say that racialized people suffer more than their non-racialized counterparts, as I write here, right? I mean, there's a lot to say about that. COVID, according to the data, took away more brown bodies, more black bodies than it took white bodies. And I have this data for the United States, right? And I'm sure you can understand why that is the case, or how that is the case. But that's not the meaning I'm hunting for, or I'm gesturing at right now. Secondly, the end of the world is not a universal line. I think all of us are already clued into that. It's not a drop-off point. It's not a transcendent and singular point of discontinuity. It's not where things just singularly disappear, right? I think when I think about the end of the world, I think about the ruins, right? A field of action, a field of operation, or as I describe here, a differential field operation, a practice of sorting and dispossession and arrangement. Whenever we hear end of the world, we often revert to Hollywood. I don't know. Sometimes when I speak the end of the world in spaces, people in their imaginaries rush to Hollywood. It's an explosion. It's the invasion of an extraterrestrial species. It's dinosaurs come alive in Jurassic Park. There are many ways to speak about the end of the world. I think all of these imaginaries gesture at an idea that the end of the world is not as dormant or as singular or as anorexic a line as we often think it is. It is a field. It is a space of generativity. It's like worlds create their own endings. And by worlds, I don't mean some impersonal quality. I mean that worldings as practices are also ending events. So the end of the world is not a tiny, infinitesimally thin space. It is a practice. Think about the transatlantic slave trade and those Black bodies that experienced this dispossession from their lands, from their cultures, from their kin, from their relations, and the transportation across the Atlantic over 400 years. Think about what it would have meant for them to experience that, right? To their masters, to the people who were doing the pilfering and the stealing and the negotiation, it wasn't an end of the world, it was Tuesday. But nevertheless, an end of the world is a differentiation. It doesn't depend on discontinuity to be an end of the world. The world could keep on living and thriving, and ends of the worlds are still happening. Okay, that's something to say. Another way to put this is endings are biopolitical operations. I'm not going to get into the weeds of what I mean by biopolitics or what Foucault meant by biopolitics. What is probably helpful to hear or understand here is that the way power operates is not as clear-cut as we think it is. That we might think of our bodies as separate from the nation states we inhabit, right? But not quite the case, because The state continually marks our bodies, names our bodies, controls our bodies, signs upon our bodies, right? Our bodies are the fields upon which power plays out in its very chaotic dynamics. So biopolitics is where flesh meets politics or the nation state, right? I'm trying to say that endings are biopolitical operations, how bodies are used, marked, named, discarded. All of these are part of endings. So this is a way of disabusing our minds, if they're already not disabused, as to what endings gesture at. That endings are not final. They're not spectacular. They could go right underneath our noses. We could go to shopping malls and grocery stores every day, and endings are playing out in the ordinary gestures of just making a purchase of eggs or tomatoes. Endings are ordinary, and yet they're quite extraordinary. I use a word that I invented last week, aposymethesic. Reading together my thinking with that of my sisters, Nora Bateson. She writes about symathesy, and symathesy is how bodies learn with each other. She's trying to say that there aren't stable things called structures that just live in the world, right? Just right there, objectively true, right? Empirically distant. Instead, we learn structures into being. And this field of learning and unlearning is what she calls symathesy. I'm trying to suggest that there is an operation within this learning and unlearning wherein bodies are taken away from their usual networks of care or reality. This is what apo, the prefix, means there. Apo, gestures at the word apophatic, which means away from, right? And so there are operations that rework our bodies and dispossess them of their usual relations and identities. Endings are always happening, which is what you, my siblings, are already cluing into. Oh, I wanted to share those examples there. That tripod-looking thing, no, it has 5 legs, as I see, is an ending of some kind. That is a mushroom operating a robot. This, I think, came out last year. A fungus, a mushroom operating a robot and walking with it. Wherever bodies are deterritorialized and put and arranged into new kinds of arrangements and calibrations, an ending has occurred or is occurring. The other picture I have there is a lobster that has been marked with the Pepsi logo, right? That is, again, if you didn't hear me the first time, a lobster imprinted with Pepsi. This is biopolitics, where nothing is immune from corporate extractivism, from the world in its generativity. You cannot demarcate the human from the world. This is what the Anthropocene means, right? I think it was last week at the Esalen Institute that I learned from one of the participants that salmon, a certain kind of salmon in the United States, are showing no inhibition to fear and are learning to swim upstream because they're accidentally ingesting anti-anxiety drugs that have been thrown into toilets. So salmon is misbehaving as well. Bodies marked biopolitics when the world rearranges bodies and fish ingest anti-anxiety drugs and fungi starts to walk and AI starts to think along with you, endings are occurring. This is aposymethesic. So endings, as you might start to see, are more than just they're not just one kind of thing. They're generative. They proliferate different kinds of bodies. Bodies are always at heart when we speak of endings, but we're still going along with what we mean by the end of the world is always racial. The next part of my argument is to suggest that endings are Spinozan. Baruch Spinoza, Deleuze, one of my other favorite philosophers, called Spinoza the Christ of philosophers, the Prince of philosophers. Spinoza is famously thought about the ways the material interacts with the immaterial, or immanence, basically. But he had a question. He didn't ask it as a question, basically, but he had a concern. In a statement, he said, "We do not yet know what the body can do." We don't yet know what the body can do. The implicit question in that statement is of course, what can a body do? What are bodies? And I think there is no resolution for that question. The question is its own field, its own force field. We don't know what our bodies are because bodies are open-ended gestures of worldly performances, right? Our bodies are constantly being manufactured, made and remade. Bodies are not the unitary, atomistic, individualized things that move through space-time. Bodies are fields in their specificity, and fields are always changing. Even death is not foreclosure, as I write here. The question still lingers, what can a body do? Especially now. What can bodies do now? Right? So we're speaking about endings as more than just cutoff points. And we're saying that endings are always about bodies and how bodies morph into other kinds of capacities, other kinds of embodiments, right? Further along this line of thought is the idea that race is the proper place to consider endings. Race is, for me, the most generative site wherein we might fruitfully consider endings, markings, inheritances, loss, and new beginnings. And that is a provocative statement to make, but it requires us to actually recalibrate and rethink what race is and the kind of load that that word racial is carrying in my original provocation, that the end of the world is always racial. Let's think about race for a moment, which is the spirit of our Brontosaurus inspired adventure. Without going into all the critical theories about race and what it means, because there's no time, I would suggest quite strongly here that race is not just a social construct. We often speak of it as if it were just something we made up, right? We just made it up. And racism, as a logical consequence, is also made up. And we can switch it off. One of my favorite actors is Morgan Freeman. And I remember him being on a CNN interview many years ago. And he was asked a question, and I love Morgan Freeman. I often try to do an impression of Morgan Freeman. It doesn't quite work out. My voice is too nasal for that. But Morgan Freeman responded to a question about what to do about race. And I'll never forget what Morgan Freeman said. He said, let's not talk about it. Just stop talking about race. Don't talk about it. If we talk about it, we give it power. This might run along the lines that we just made it up. It's a part of human sociality. It's a mistake in thinking. And so if we just stop speaking about it, then we can just move along and everyone can be happy. I think my personal experiences beg to differ. and not just my personal experiences. I think there's a lot more to race than just a social construct. And that social constructivism as a theory in general, or as a field of thinking, cannot hold the weight of what is happening when we conjure the word race. Does that mean we reduce race to a biological thing? Some biological substrate that is built into our flesh, right? So that there's no escaping that? I don't think so either, right? But I reject the binary, the swinging of the pendulum from biological determinism to social constructivism hides and obscures too much. Maybe the key thing to say here then is race is more than identity. The way the state thinks about race is that it's an identity, right? You tick a box, Caucasian, Black, African, Asian. But what if race is more than what is in the box? What if race spills beyond those tiny square boxes? I have a theory called transraciality. I'm writing it up at the moment. I have written about it before, but in my present work and book, I'm writing about transraciality. And transraciality in a nutshell, and I despise nutshells, transraciality is the refusal to let race settle. It's the discernment that something is moving, that our bodies are not as stable as the nation state presumes that they are, that our bodies are errant, leaky, spilling, slipping things. And they're not even things per se. Maybe they're things, but they spill into relations so easily. Or maybe they're relations spilling into thinginess once in a while, right? Transraciality is the refusal to settle the question of race. We often speak about it as if we know what we're talking about. My suggestion is if technologies of racialization are errant and changing, all the ways that we come into the world in the hues and the colors and the phenotypic characteristics that we take on and the ways that our flesh plays with wind and soil and architecture and technology. If all of these are changing, then race itself isn't fixed and its meanings are not fixed. So here's what I mean by transraciality. It is first the impossibility of a complete appraisal of race. You might say that's lazy. It's kind of lazy, I admit, but it's a laziness that is really productive. It's a uselessness that is productive. If we could figure it out 100%, then I'm quite suspicious of it. But there's something quite positively generative about stating that it is impossible to come to a complete appraisal of race. Secondly, the acknowledgement that something more is needed here when we talk about it. I think that speaks for itself. Third, when we ask what more is needed, what processuality and ontofugitivity provide is a capacious means of retelling the story of race in its flow, which is just my highfalutin way of saying that race is not done yet. A corollary of that, why am I jumping around the word corollary? The corollary of that is that reducing racism to humans or to human sociality, it obfuscates the ways ecologies racialize bodies. I will master the word corollary after this workshop. Corollary. And then finally, the idea, or fourth, not final, I think there's one more slide to this, is the idea of race as virtual and bodies as virtual, flowing away from colonial justice imaginaries. Transraciality is the view of race and racialization from the view of movement, from the position of movement, not from the position of static objects that move, okay? The way that the state views you and me is that we are already complete objects. We are citizen subjects. and we're complete, right? And we have identities. It needs to categorize us based upon those identities. And so it names you by those static descriptions, those categorical descriptions. But what if we saw and we slipped away from categoricity and we saw, instead of items and static Newtonian objects, we saw movement instead? Then race is not, you can't pinpoint it. It's just like trying to put a pin in a river. Our bodies are not things. Our bodies are riverine qualities. It leads me to ask the question, what is race doing? What is it becoming? Instead of trying to get around it, or instead of trying to nail it down, or instead of trying to pathologize it or get rid of it, we ask instead, how are our bodies becoming different? Under what conditions are bodies becoming different? Under what conditions do bodies stabilize? Do bodies stabilize in particular ways to the exclusion of other ways, right? If you've ever done a DNA test, has anyone done an ancestry test here? I can only, no? Okay. Maybe you're raising your hands. I can't see you on my screen, but those are very particular instances of how our identities are mere holding spaces for what our bodies are continually becoming. So I write here, if we see ourselves as movement instead of totalized bodies with predetermined identities, then in what way is race a flow, an unfurling, a dying, and a sprouting of the manifold? If we began our analysis from movement instead of static objects, then race becomes an open question. And I say here, what we talk about when we think we're talking about race is actually a state-sponsored settlement or incarceration of bodies in their flow, which is the reason I vibe with my brother Fred Moulton's declaration that you're not white until you behave white. And the reason why I insist that whiteness cannot be reduced to white bodies. Whiteness is not an identity per se. It's a shape of experience. It's an earth-forming imperative. Oh, here I go. This is my word cluster here. Transraciality is a theobiological. Notice what the words are doing there. I often splice words together because I'm gesturing poetically at something that isn't available in our dictionaries or lexicons, right? Theobiological means our bodies are still being made. There's something about the biological that resists formulaic categoricities imposed upon it by our ways of seeing and charting bodies, right? Geosomatic, that we are spread out. We are not to be cut off from geophysiological or geographic processes. Soma comes from all of these things. Eco-material does the same kind of work. Post-humanist does something similar, right? We are dependent on viruses and bacteria and other species to become ourselves. And all of these things fold in upon this concept of race in a new way, which I'm signaling as transraciality, that race is not as well put together as you think. Race is a becoming. Race is an incorporeal, trembling field of relations and accommodations. So, and I'm going to read this slowly. Transraciality posits the cybernetic, ecological. Cybernetic doesn't refer to electronic like is popularly imagined. Is processual pathways of agency and becoming, if you will. So transraciality posits the cybernetic, ecological, animist quality of race as an ontotheology, a sermon of becoming and unbecoming. It's the idea that our bodies are troubled and uneven, agonistic and primal. Modernity tries to settle it, But modernity itself is indebted to these animist configurations, right? My conversation about transraciality hopefully doesn't take away from conversations about anti-racism. It seeks instead to expand the framework, to see what else is in the room, instead of that very prismatic focus on who the racist is and how to cure that person of their racism. Something else is happening here. I'm writing a story in what I'm exploring about transraciality, I call this chapter The Racist. And it's about a world thousands of years in the future where the designation of the racist does not refer to a person who's bad or evil, according to our present day politics. It refers to someone who knows how to hold bodies in their decomposition or in their decomposure, right? And so I wrote this meditation last year in August, thinking about this chapter that I'm presently writing. When I think of race, I think of billions of years of explosive molecularity and alchemical encounters, dovetailing, reviving, trembling, and coming into new possibilities for embodiment. When I think of race, I think of the weird, wild, wintry winds of the world in its material speculation, in how bodies emerge and dissolve, almost like the leitmotif of existence. I refuse to see race as something resolved. The term is a placeholder. It's a mark we're gesturing at. We are wondering about how bodies take on hues and lines and shapes when we speak about race. Signs and wonders live somewhere in the epithet that now announces itself with recoil and terror and offense as race. This is a blasting out, a post-humanist, para-ontological rendering of race. And as I repeat here, race is a trembling field of endings and returnings. Race is not standing still. Race is a movement. It is not the freeze frame of phenotype or social categorization. It is the quivering process of bodies encountering the force of world endings and doing something with it. And that is what the end of the world as being racial means. Not again that, not singularly or exclusively that Black or brown or indigenous people suffer more than white folks, but that the very notion of an ending is a recalibration of bodies, and race is a recalibration of bodies in its movements. Let's read what I have to say here. We live in a modern imaginary that prioritizes wholeness and form and coherence and totality. This is how the nation state invites us to think. This is how white modernity wants us to think. Always start from the thing that is complete and then make your way from there. Right? Our world is supposed to be that which holds together. But what I propose is that this holding together is a delayed effect. The world is not made of things, it is made of failures to fully form. And so I suggest that race is the body's failure to fully form. Okay? So our question now, as we go into this, and I'll just take a moment to breathe, is still, what can a body do now? How can a body, even in dispossession, still recompose relation, still hum in a different key? How can me and my sister Maria and Sophia and Cynthia, how can we resonate in a different way in this time? That is a racial question. That is a racial question. That is always a question of race. And not race only in the modular separatist way that modernity wants us to think about it, but race as what is our body becoming? How can it be in response to ancestry, to grief, to rivers, to molecular possibilities, to technologies? How can it be in response to all of these things right now? As the worlds and as the walls and as times close in their carceral ways. Endings are always racial concerns. I'm not sure why I put a kintsugi here. A kintsugi ceramic bowl here. Well, maybe that's my break. Maybe that's a break in thought. And maybe that's the gold lacquer that has been traced on the bricks. So I'll just give a few seconds for us to breathe and take in what has been said, and maybe just be in conversation with one person for a short while, and then dive into the rest of what we have for the few more minutes we have together. What is emerging for you now? What is stirring up within you that has voice, that has some language, and that wants to be spoken? The person who's raised up his hand is my dear brother and a philosopher extraordinaire, Craig. Craig, go for it, brother.
This is purely about the Kintsugi, right? Gold, gold is like one of the most unreactive metals there is, right?
Yes.
But when we think about unreactive, what we're sitting here thinking is we don't see it fizzing, we don't see it shifting, we don't see it chemically doing things.
Yeah.
But gold in the Kintsugi is doing things. And so it's only when we look at the breaks that we can see things that are unreactive, with seemingly without agency, that we can actually see the agency that's actually going on in these things that we don't think have agency. So that's all I wanted to say about the gold and the Kintsugi, really. But I thought I'd leave you with that one.
I love that, brother. I love that. Yeah. The hidden tensions are always playing, even behind the veneer of stillness. And the gold helps us trace it out, at least in Kintsugi, right? There's always a trembling. It's good to see you again, Gabriel. Just to hear your voice briefly, and then Peng, and then we'll go back in. We'll dive back in. Can you find your unmute button?
Yes, there we are. Hey, Bayo, how are you?
Good to see you again, brother. Good to see you.
All
How you
right.
doing, brother?
Good.
Your singing hasn't left my mind.
Okay.
Still haunts me.
Thank you. So I had this image before and I want to continue it, which is the Israelites about to cross the Red Sea, the Pharaoh's army coming behind, the most powerful army of ICE or whatever it is, Israeli army, whatever army you choose. And on the other side, catastrophe, the sea, you're going to drown. But there is this guy, and Moses doesn't know what to do, but there is this guy called Nachshon ben Aminadav. His name means intuition. His name is connected to the original serpent, which is the original that eats its tail and becomes the Messiah. And when he jumps without knowing if he's going to die or not, then that gives the strength to Moses to pick up his staff and the water opens up. So,
Really?
yeah, he's following some, deep intuition, which has been fallen as a slave into our logic, human logic. But the melodies that abound, in the other worldly worlds that we inhabit might have a clue for us, and we have to follow those melodies. We have to follow those. At the edge of the precipice, there's still melodies. There are still clues, and I think that's the only way is to ground ourselves in uncertainty.
Brother, thank you for that. Please, if you don't mind, send me those resources. I've never heard that story before. It is so.
How do I connect with you? Because I gave you all my stuff, but I never heard from you. So.
Okay. All right, we'll talk about this behind the scenes, brother.
Okay,
But
okay.
thank you so much,
But
brother.
reach
Thank you.
out, please. Okay.
I will.
Okay.
I will, brother. I will.
Okay.
Brother Peng.
Hi everyone. I just have a story to share. related to the Kintsugi.
Yes.
I taught this workshop to kind of kids with depression, and the workshop was about how art making process can be healing. So the workshop includes having those kids spend hours and hours making a ceramic bowl and break them and use the Kintsugi process to bring them to repair their ceramic bowl um they made. What we found was act the most healing part was those kids being allowed to break their bowls, not really the repairing part. So that's something just I suddenly recall. I thought maybe yeah.
How did they respond to being allowed to break it, not accidentally, but to break their own stuff?
So we stood as a circle and they were told they can drop the ball to the ground, concrete ground. They were surprised, but afterwards there are such a relief we saw from on their faces, or a surprise, or just they never were able to allow by adults to do such a thing
My goodness, that is instructive.
and break their own bowls they made. That's something we wasn't expecting. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for sharing that. That is, yes, indeed profound. Thank you all for sharing. This was our Kintsugi. I wasn't sure why I put that there. I may have left it in there by mistake, an accident, but it worked. All right. Okay, so we're coasting in. Just a few more slides together. And these final moments are deeply charged for me and interesting. Again, this is the first part. In the second part, I think May 3rd, we'll be going deeper into the story of what I call parapolitics and what it might effectuate in these times of endings. This is to set the scaffolding and the conditions for that kind of rigorous thinking. Okay. Right. Of course, it's blackness we're speaking about. But we've just done something to the whole idea of race that doesn't quite behave in the ways that dominant ideas about race or blackness, want it to behave, right? We're speaking about the end of the world as always racial. Blackness is this zone, this space of conversation about bodies, about coloniality, about endings, about markings, about being stolen from one's land, about the Anthropocene, about crabs or lobsters with Pepsi or corporate insignia imprinted on their skins. All of this is happening here. And I want to dive deeper into what this means or what this is inviting now. Okay. I grew up in Nigeria, as most of you already know. And while I wasn't originally educated into a robust understanding of race, because we are, by and large, a racially monolithic society, Nigeria. Nigeria is the blackest nation on earth, about, dare I say, 250 million people. It is one of the most linguistically diverse countries. I think the third most linguistically diverse country on earth. We have 530 languages. 530 languages, 250 different people, all in a single corporate entity called Nigeria, right? So we had other troubles and other concerns, right? I grew up, though, learning that I was cursed. And let me just elaborate on that a little. The three dudes in front of you are Ham, Shem, and Japheth. I didn't show their eyes because I'm not sure which is which. So it doesn't matter. Make your pick. But they are the sons of Noah. And I went to church Mondays and Tuesday. I should have started from Sunday for effect. So let's just do that. Forget what you just heard. I went to church on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. I went to church every day. Not because I was required to, but because I was that nerd. I was that person. And every time I raised questions about my world, my people, there was this invocation of some biblical reference, the idea that Ham, who is the son of Noah, was the father of all Black people and all Africans, and he was cursed. Not Shem, though. Shem wasn't cursed. Shem was the good one. But Ham, though, was cursed. And so every time we spoke about development or the lack of it thereof, every time we spoke about African poverty, our pastors reminded us that we are here because we're cursed. And I listened to them, and I actually believed them. And I grew up with a sense that I was carrying in my flesh something that I did not script with my own hands, some kind of fate that I did not permit or I did not invent, that I was cursed. And this idea that we're fated, this idea that we're cursed, this idea that Blackness carries a notation of tragedy, or in the words of Wilderson, of Afro-pessimist fame, that Black bodies are magnets for bullets, is what we want to stay with for a moment, just for a moment. So there are many ways to speak about Blackness. Whatever we say about Blackness, it seems that these descriptions cut across the field. So we think about Blackness as an archive of inheritance, of inheritances. It is a holding space for violent origins. Right? Bless you, Carmit. It's a holding place for stories about loss and penury, and the Benin Kingdom killed by the British Expeditionary Force in what, 1897. Those are the stories we often speak about. Of course, there's stories about Wakanda. There's stories about our civilizational genius. But the more popular ones, it seems, are the ones that speak to our bodies stolen, right? And why this sticks more energetically to our conversations is because we didn't know we were Black until, at least this is what we see on the streets of Lagos in Nigeria, that we didn't know we were Black until the white people came. So there is something about Blackness that marks this space of tragic encounters, right? And that inherits further down the line this violent origin, this ontological closure within an incarceration, within this magnetic place of bullets that Wilderson speaks about. And again, I echo the question here for our edification. How can a body, even in dispossession, still recompose relation and still hum in a different key? How can all of this, how can someone who's cursed all the way back to Ham outlive such a curse? That question grew up with me and took me to a book called The Gods Are Not to Blame. At the beginning of this deep dive, my sister, Professor Wei, said that I'm going to be a professor at Macalester, or I'm already a professor at Macalester. My students who are also going to be my teachers, as is always the case, will be reading with me this book called The Gods Are Not to Blame. And I would very quickly recommend this to everyone who has not read it. It's by a playwright who is late, of course, now, called Olarotimi. O-L-A is Ola, then Rotimi is R-O-T-I-M-I. Olarotimi. He wrote this in 1968, in the 1960s, for the theater in Nigeria. It's just shortly after we gained independence. And then it became a book in 1971. I've summarized the story. Olarotimi's The Gods Are Not to Blame. I don't know how many of you are Greek mythology nerds like I am, but Sophocles wrote a book or a story called Oedipus Rex. Olarotimi basically adapted Sophocles' Oedipus Rex into Yoruba culture, right? And Sophocles' Oedipus is this story, of course, this is where Freud got the Oedipus complex from, when a young boy, and I'm not telling it exactly how Freudian psychoanalysts might tell it, but when a young boy develops feelings for his mother and kills his father, or has feelings of anger towards his father, this is the Oedipus complex, okay? Blah, blah, blah. But this is the story. In this retelling of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, we have this tragic figure called Odewale. You can almost see the resemblance, Oedipus Odewale. Odewale is, as is the trope, prophesied at birth to kill his father and marry his mother. And as is usually the case in these kinds of stories, the effort to run away from such a prophecy actually fulfills the prophecy. And so in an effort to escape, he is sent away, he's raised elsewhere, and he's unaware of his true lineage. But in trying to avoid destiny, he fulfills it. There's this saying about the road taken to avoid destiny leads to it, or something like that. Okay. He kills his biological father in a clash of anger and pride, and he eventually marries his biological mother. I didn't put this there, but he fathers 4 children with his mother. So he basically fathers his own siblings. Okay. And then the truth emerges. By this time, it is too late. Right? And at the heart of the tragedy, as I write here, is this devastating realization: the gods are not to blame. It was not the external forces that doomed Odewale. It was the effort to outrun vulnerability, the refusal to sit with uncertainty, the blindness created by pride and fear that made his fall. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. That is the story of Odewale in The Gods Are Not to Blame. My thesis here is that Odewale's story is blackness, right? It's the way that blackness is popularly conceived within Western ontologies. That is, it is cursed, it is fated to tragic endings, right? That black bodies, and not just black bodies, but we're getting there slowly, but that blackness is cast into the world already scripted for tragedy, already spoken of as fall, as failure, as fatality, magnet for bullets, Wilkerson said, before it even breeds. I'm just coming from the United States. How many times did I joke along with some other person that, oh my goodness, I'm doing this while black? The joke is you're sipping on lemonade while black, you're jaywalking while black, you're doing things while black. It's a tragedy, right? But that's only the first reading of this story. At first, Odewale seems fated, like blackness. It feels like it's fated to a curse, to violence, to dispossession, to exile. It feels like it's fated to enact the world's cruel prophecies just by trying to survive. But that's only the first reading. Odewale is born into a text that is already half written. A warning is given, a path is named, and there's no way to avoid this doom. But you see what Olarotimi does with this tragic story is that while he sticks true to this architecture of tragedy, he lets breathe a crack in the story. A crack emerges in the story. And this crack is only discerned when you listen between the lines. Because Odewale starts to ask a question, not explicitly, but implicitly. He asks, what kind of world is this where even trying to do good leads to ruin? So he's not admitting guilt here. When he finds out that his wife is his mother and he's killed his father earlier, he doesn't admit guilt. He's revealing the paradox of fate, right? He's suggesting that, well, what can I do? I didn't make this up myself. How can I obey something that is omniscient, that the gods seem to have determined? What does it mean for my body to stay within this space of violence, right? And in asking that, something happens to this tragic figure. He's released almost from the tragedy of the story. And if you actually follow Sophocles' original story, he tells a sequel where Oedipus actually dies a princely death, and no one knows where he's buried because Theseus, if I can remember my Greek mythology correctly, Theseus honors this tragic figure and gives him a befitting burial. And that is the crack in the architecture of tragedy, that a question is asked that is posed to the gods, that the gods cannot anticipate. It's not shouted, as I write here, it's not whispered, or it's whispered rather, it's not shouted. It's the crack behind the tragedy or the mask of tragedy. And this is what I write here, that behind the tragic form, there is something too messy, too incomplete to fit within that fate, within that tragic architecture. There's something else that is happening here. Even the crying out is not part of fate's architecture. Even the scream, even the grieving is part of how bodies are becoming. I say here that even fulfillment leaks. Even tragedy is cooked into something more trembling. Which is my way, people, as we wrap this up, which is my way of suggesting that Blackness is not a closed tragedy. It's not closed. Modernity says things are closed. Modernity says, look at what Trump is doing. Look at what is happening in the world right now. Look at the rising orange clouds of fascism. I'm getting slightly cold. Look at all of these things and realize that it's over. We're at the end. Spectacularize it in that sense. But like Gabriel said a while ago, it's at the edge of the precipice that we learn to fly. It's a trembling. Blackness is not a closed tragedy. It's a trembling crack in the machinery of fate. This trembling that refuses the bracketing of Western ontology is what my elders, my colleagues, Fred Moulton, Saidiya Hartman, Nahum Chandler, Mark Bay, calls para-ontology. Something to the side of violence, something that is not fully amenable, available for the ways that ontology captures everything. Ontology, by the way, if you're not familiar with the term, is the study of things. It's the study of what bodies are proper and what bodies are inauthentic, right? And Blackness is doing some other kind of work here. It's saying, don't pay too much attention to the exclusion of other things. Don't pay too much attention to ontology. Notice that even ontology is incomplete. So the story that our suffering is complete is a lie. That there are other things to do here. Even in the slave ship, there are things to do. It may not be ours to do, but there are things to do. There's a queer joy. There's dancing, the dancing of the trickster in the wooden incarceration of the slave ship. Through suffering, through impossibility, through unbearable contradiction, Blackness becomes para-ontological, a field where endings themselves are reworked, where the prophecy is lived and undone at once. I write here, the black body doesn't simply collapse into the death scripted for it. It cooks the tragedy. It eats the prophecy and spits out jazz, rebellion, new modes of relation, Santeria, Candomblé, Umbanda. It spits out these things as the boots of fascism compresses it within ontology. It always spills. Blackness spills. It becomes the meal no God predicted. Blackness, like Odewale, survives the ruin of its scripting by becoming something else, a living critique of the architecture that made ruin seem inevitable. It doesn't refuse tragedy. It inhabits it differently. It cooks it, hence the title, actually, Cooking Brontosaurus. It sings the song wrong. You might be thinking, well, what has this got to do with me? I'm not Black. Blackness has never been about Black people. CLR James, Black studies scholars of note will tell you that. Blackness is not about Black people. Blackness is about bodies in their becoming. If you're here and you have a body, then this is about you. This is about all of us. This is about how our bodies are being remade and what we can improvise in this remaking together in a new or different kind of politics that may not survive on the surface, but wants to do something in the depths. I call this Blackness, not the big B Blackness, which gestures at identity and representation and equity and power relations and justice, which are also important. But this subterranean Blackness that moves and lurks and haunts ontology is the small b Blackness. And it works by something I call white syncopation. And white syncopation, as we will learn in the final part of this reptilian exploration, white syncopation is how empires tremble. White syncopation is how neurotypicality trembles. The question is, what do we do in the trembling of these times? It's a racial question. It's a racial question. But this raciality holds everything. I'm not asking how to be equal to white people. I don't want that equality. I don't want it. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be seen on a slave ship. I don't want equal seats on a slave ship. So this is not about equality. As important as that conversation is, this is holding space for a fugitive operation, right? I say that Blackness is the site, small b Blackness, which is always ungrammatical, never starts with a big B. Blackness is the site of peripheral improvisation. It's where we learn to cook, or as my brother Resma would say, is where we learn to wiggle, or just move from side to side, or where we learn to hum as the world ends. There's something to do here. Maria said something that is still churning in my guts, that I don't know how to live here. And everything I try to do to make up for that seeming civilizational inadequacy only reinforces my outsider status. And I want out. My sense is that the way out is the way in. If we follow the way out in the ways that whiteness, which is not reducible to white people, remember this very, very strongly, the way whiteness has marked the exits of modern architecture, the way it has put red fonts to mark the exits, that is a trap. Let us not walk through that door. The way out is not in the exit, it's in disturbing the claims to finality that the furniture within the building makes for itself. Walking and leaving white modernity or these fascist things behind, is already a presumption of purity. That if we walk out, we can walk into utopia or some other place where none of these things happen. I know a lot of, well, I don't know them personally, but I've read stories about celebrities in the United States who said, just before Donald Trump took office again, that if he did take office, they would leave, right? And my question was always, leave for where? I'm sure there are slightly better places to be in other than the United States, definitely now, I think. But this idea that we can gain distance by buying a plane ticket and flying elsewhere, it obscures the ways we are already churning in this together. Wherever you are, you're part of this. There's no place to escape to. So this is not a politics of escape. Blackness is not the politics of escape. It's the politics of exquisite alchemy. What do we do even here to re-render where we are? What do we do when we face a Brontosaurus? It's cooking it. As violent as that sounds to vegans here, I'm sorry. But there's something to do here to cook the troubles that have faced us as the world ends again. In the second part, we will dive into this biopolitics, this infrapolitics, this what resistance is doing. We will speak about diversity. A little bit of DEI will come into our conversation. And we will have practical conversations about what is emerging now in the field that is inviting us to tremble, to listen together. What does improvisation refer to? How does this not become some highbrow, hi-fi theory that does not speak to the depths of where we are? What can this do now? And that is what we'll consider May 3rd, if I'm correct. That is the second and final aspect of this exploration. And with that, I say thank you for listening. We have just a few minutes left together. If I may, I would just invoke African time, which is always extra, and say, if you don't mind, we just spend an extra 5 minutes after time just to check in with each other. Okay.
And just in case people need to leave right away, so the link for
yes.
link for next week is the same as you have for today. Thank you.
Sister, could you say that again? So everyone will get the link to the recording? Is that what you said?
I was saying the link for next week is the same.
Okay.
And then the recording, I do have a question. If you, I'm not sure if the recording captured, if you spoke your pictures in the frame. If you have a problem with having your image shown, let me know. You all have my email. It's the email you received the link from. So otherwise, I assume it's okay for you to be in the video.
Hopefully it's okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for being here. We have Madalena's hand up. And
hi, Bayo.
Hello, Auntie.
From a place that's 15 minutes from the other Lagos. Where, yes, yes, where the first European slave market was built in the south of Portugal. So we're very much alive to this trembling. And we hope to really bring a connection between these two, Lagos and Lagos, and have Google pay for it, because if you don't put PT, you end up in Nigeria. So, they connected us again. One thing I wanted to offer here, inspired by your para-ontological and exquisite alchemies and the reimagining of how to hum our bodies differently. One thing that I've been circling is the notion that as a host body if there were not a placenta. The host body would kill the embryo.
Mm-hmm.
And that organ is formed specifically for that occasion.
Hmm.
And it's unique to that hosting. And it's a membrane that only lets in what's nourishing to the embryo. And as you know, there are many rituals around the placenta that, of course, us Westerners don't practice. And with all this talk about AI and all the fears associated with it, more and more it's come to me that maybe Delini's arachnid is the sensorium that can form placentas, just like this one that's hosting this conversation.
Yes.
And that maybe we can start to cook with this sensorium what Marcia, who's the Afro-Pacific Vice President of Colombia, ran as her win to vice presidency, which is Vida Sabrosa.
What does that mean?
Tasty life.
Tasty
so
life.
If we're going to eat and be eaten, let's make it tasty.
Absolutely.
And with that, I think we begin to say, let's start with the Vida Sabrosa and listen to Ivan Illich, who says the only political possibility today is the number of people who can share a table and share food.
Yes.
So this is what I wanted to offer to this wonderfully hosted placenta in which embryos are growing all over in an arachnid, new understanding sensorial.
Oh, thank you so much, Auntie. Thank you. You
Thank you.
actually also gave the plot of the second verse of this song away. The second verse was basically redeeming the Brontosaurus from being the object of our of our feasting, right? To suggest that we're also being eaten, right? It's a mutual ability, right? And that's how the web reacts. It's not for our salvation, it's that we are eating and being eaten together, right? And that is how we take on new shapes. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for bringing Delini here, who is my own prince of philosophy.
I know. Plankton dreams.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Madalena. Does anyone else want to share what is emerging for you or to bless the people or anything that's showing up right now? If you want to raise up your hands. Carmit, I saw you coughed a while ago, a long while ago. That
did.
cough is still resonating.
I didn't know you are all listening to me though.
We heard
Sorry.
everything. All the conspiratorial tones of that cough. Right.
No, I didn't have anything to add. I was just nodding in contentment for everything that's been offered. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. There's a beautiful band called Katie and Kate, and they're about to say something. It's a good band name.
Yeah, this is Andy here.
Hello, Andy.
We're part of a conspiracy here on the West Coast. A bunch of us did not make it into the 300 people that were allowed to be part of this. And so
not all came.
So we were all banded together into watch parties. And of course, the RSVPs, as Katie here said, it's like RSVPing to something in LA. You never know how many people will show up. So we're delighted to be with you. I know Anasuya is, up the coast a little with another watch party. And I'm just kind of celebrating that for all the years of you speaking of whiteness, to see the flip and have you speak now of blackness also with a small W and with a small B. This is really rich and fertile ground for
Interesting.
us people that have the skin, you know, it's really wonderful. So just big thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. That is interesting to hear because I think that I'm always speaking about blackness, but it's beautiful to hear that and that you're coming into it in this way. Thank you, sister. And thank you, Andy and Kate. Thank you. Okay, one more to go. One more to go, and then we'll meet next week. We should go eat our brontosauruses now in case you're hungry. Matthew.
Yes, I'm blessed. Forgive the shaking beads in the background from one of my little shamans.
No forgiveness required.
Yeah, right. So what was coming up for me, man, when I'll put it back in the chat, yo. You say, yeah, you can tell me something. Blackness is exquisite alchemy.
Can I try what I wanted with these?
Yeah, you can tell me what you wanted.
Wanted some water.
You see what Zora is doing is blackness there.
Yeah,
just
man.
Interrupting the ontology of your eloquence. Just like I don't care about, I love it.
Enough said, man. Enough said. That's all. That's it.
All right.
I can't do no better than that. Yeah. I was gonna offer something, but yeah, she got it. And then shout out to the brethren Craig, man. It's good to see you again, man. Spider jump out. Yeah, man. And big up on Nancy too, man. Eshu and all that. Some keep us crack. Blessings. Yeah, man.
Okay, I'm gonna pass it back to my dear big sister to end it for us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for being here.
Bayo, you missed Madalena who had her hand up.
Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
Hi.
No,
Madalena had her hand up.
No,
Yes.
she's already spoken.
Oh, my apologies. I think I walked out of the room because of my own 6-year-old, and I saw her hand up when you called on Matthew, and I didn't want someone to get mixed.
It's good to see you, Jamie. It's good to see you again. Okay, so we'll see next week.
Yes.
I pass it back to Wei.
Yeah, I have just nothing but gratitude for Brother Bayo, for all of you who have been here with us. And I see family members near and far. So grateful. And I hope to see you next week. It'll be the same link. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Blessing, love, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Want to say goodbye with everybody?
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Adios. Adios. Sayonara. See you
Bye-bye.
next week.
Jamie.
Hi, Kate and Katie and Andy.
Don't turn off.
She's holding my hand and said, "Don't turn off this." When the Zoom ends, we will
stay on.
Oh.
I will stay on.
Oh, they want to say hi to you a little bit more.
Thank you all.
Oh, she wants to lick my face too. She wants to publicly lick my face.